Hello, I'm going to be conducting the discussion summary interview now related to cognitive biases. I am Anderson Fish. This is my friend Lana.
Hello.
I'm conducting this interview on cognitive biases in relation to free will, specifically the influences individuals and their biases have on their cognition and critical thinking, and how it is perceived that these biases affect one's ability to rationalize their own decisions. In simpler terms, how separated from reality does someone have to be before they lose any semblance of free will? I would give an example if that doesn't make much sense. In our society, we typically don't try people if they can be proved that they're insane. In our view, they no longer have free will to act on their own and be tried by the law if they are completely and utterly insane. So what I'm asking is, how much cognitive biases do you need to have influencing your free will and divorcing you from reality before you simply don't have free will anymore? How distanced and delusional does one have to be from the actual reality of their situation before you simply can't judge them as being an autonomous person in their own right anymore? To start off, I have a broad set of framing questions with me, though we can diverge from them if it calls for it. First of all, I would like to hear your perspective on some simple concepts. What does free will mean to you?
I guess free will kind of means being able to do, say, speak, act how you will, how you want. I don't know, there's not much to it, I guess, from how I see it.
Free will to you is simply to be able to do as you will?
Yeah.
Okay. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Your cognitive biases, like, for example, are you raised in a... Think of the culture, the politics, the religion of your family. Those contribute to your biases because you've been surrounded by a perspective. The way that you've learned to think, those are your cognitive biases. How would you view your own cognitive biases in relation to your free will? Cognitive biases are anything that affect the way that you think. Everything from a simple preference of taste of a food to mental illness are all biases, though some have specific names.
I guess a cognitive bias that I have has to do with how I make relationships and how I go about, like, friendships and whatnot. I was raised in a very detached environment. My parents are divorced, and both of my parents are kind of, they're in the picture, but not emotionally, and whatnot. So it's kind of like having to, it's almost like I learned to do that with other people. Does it kind of count?
No, I get that completely. Being inherently emotionally detached or not having emotional knowledge learned from a stable family, that's going to contribute to every decision that you make. That's an inherent bias. And that would make the decisions that you make naturally be influenced by it. So what you're saying in a nutshell is a lot of your free will has already been decided by the biases that come from having a detached relationship with your parents.
Yeah, definitely.
And your parents, of course, being separated and having to live in that environment.
I agree. It's really how you grow up in your environment around you heavily affects how you become successful.
And of course, how you become as a person contributes to your biases.
Exactly. Every small decision.
What biases, and this of course stems from the next question, what biases do you think are most inherent to you? For instance, here would be something, if you are someone with attachment issues, here's a great bias that takes the form of a fallacy, something called a sunk cost fallacy, where if you dedicate so much time to something that you know is not going to pan out, but you still don't give up on it because you've already sunk so much effort and time into it.
That is very true. Are you asking me for an example?
That is just one bias that you could take from your personal
Okay.
experience.
Well, I guess an example from me is because of that detached environment that I grew up in, it's almost like having other people in those small experiences with old friends and beginning friendships and stuff that kind of shaped kind of what I thought was the right way to make friends, or a healthy way, or whatever. And because of that, it's long term has affected how I go about friendships and interact with people, like even every day. It's like a conscious thing, having to relearn both, I guess.
So the kind of decisions that you make, you're almost trying to escape from the fact that your biases are so inherently affected by the way that you were raised and new relationships that you make.
Yeah.
Because as humans, the relationships that can almost always be guaranteed to us are with our parents. So when somebody is not given that ability, they'll naturally be different from those around them. Okay, so I'm just recording this real quick to inform. We had to stop recording because number one, ran out of storage, and number two, it's getting bad out here. I'm going to resume the questions when we get to a place where we can resume them. Okay, hi, we're in the car now, and as you can likely hear, it is pouring outside, at least to some extent. So we're going to resume the interview from here. We are on question 4, which is, can you think of a decision influenced by a cognitive bias? If you don't mind, give an example. How did the bias affect you? And specifically one that you can see now affected by your biases made you make something that you view as an incorrect decision, or one that I guess you disagree with.
I guess it's kind of like an overview of a situation, but putting up with old friends, because putting up with like old kind of, I guess, toxic behaviors because of how I was raised, I thought they were kind of normal. And I thought it was people showing how they like care and whatnot. I didn't see the seriousness of it, and like while I was in the situation, but after ending friendships and things with those kind of people, I look back on it and I'm like, why was I ever put in that situation?
I think that can be characterized like a sunk cost fallacy, where those were people you're already close with, right?
Yeah.
And you put up with it not only because you couldn't see it, but also you were already close with them. You didn't want to sacrifice a friendship over things that you couldn't really differentiate were truly something deplorable.
Yeah.
If that would... Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did those friends know each other?
Oh, they did, yes.
There's another one as well. Tribalism is a heavy bias on humans. Everything from the philosophy of nationalism to things as small as friend groups turning against, hating an individual for not doing a lot wrong, or turning against someone among themselves for disagreeing with the larger prevailing opinion. It's kind of horrifying the way as humans we tend to completely forget what we know to be true whenever we're in a tribe that disagrees or is acting contrary to that reality. Do you think that's applicable there?
I definitely agree. It's those kinds of groups tend to kind of have like a leader and people who kind of hold the control of a situation, and people maybe the people look up to them. So it kind of just, they all gather together on one opinion regardless of if the people themselves think it's wrong, or they don't even care. They'll go with the group.
I will ask, you just mentioned the leader system. Were you on the receiving end of a tribe, I guess, acting as one, ganging up on someone, or were you a member of the tribe ganging up on someone else?
Both. There have been situations where I didn't even know that was exactly what was going on, but we kind of all sided with the one person who kind of held the morale, I guess, of the group or whatever, and you kind of go along with whatever they say because you're scared of almost hurting their feelings or them blowing up on you, because then in turn you know that it could be turned on you, and then that's also how it got turned on me in turn, and then I kind of left from that.
Funnily enough, there's also another bias in relation to this, that a common fallacy people use when arguing is arguing something must be true because everybody believes it or everyone agrees.
The popular fallacy.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, from what you're saying, absolutely applicable there too.
Yeah, definitely. I was learning about this in math class.
if you could change anything about the world, what would it be? It could be really anything, as long as it's a very specific thing that you would change. Of course, tying in the cognitive biases here, what you would choose to change, if anything in the world, is going to, of course, show your biases, what you view as favorable, unfavorable, wrong, and right with the world.
I don't necessarily think it's wrong or that it should be like eradicated, but I think something I would change about the world is how highly we put religion above everything else. I'm not saying everybody, some people, atheists, agnostics, whatever, but people almost bring religion into political debates, or trying to dictate how their kid or people around them should live their lives, when a lot of religions kind of go against the whole free will thing, and they don't even realize it.
I think it's curious that you choose religion of all things, because religion plays such a big place in fallacies and cognitive biases that many religions depend on fallacies in order to survive. I mean, here's an example. The Catholic Church, for much of its history, essentially gatekept being able to read the Bible by keeping it in Latin, which a majority of medieval Europe, vast majority, could not understand anymore, nor could they even read. That, of course, everybody being Christian but nobody able to read the Bible except for a very specific class, would of course lead to many fallacies needing to be used in order to keep Catholic Christianity defensible in that era. You would use the fact that everybody is violently in favor of Christianity. There's your populist fallacy. Another fallacy that I could think of is what can be described as an arcane knowledge fallacy, where somebody claims to know something as the truth but can't share where they learned it, can't share proof, can't share how they learned it. Or they can share a few of those things, but it always roots into, I know it and you don't, but you should still listen to me because I'm right. And you'd be losing out by not listening to me. And that's what the Catholic Church would do by keeping the actual Bible away from Christians who aren't specifically having investment into the structure of the church, which the church itself was oftentimes ran like a business or a country, and they'd have great justifiable reason to keep people under control like that, keeping their customers paying, keeping their citizens in check.
I agree with that.
I wanted to ask, related to this actually, what is the specific thing you would change about religion? Because of course you have described that there are flaws in place, especially with how it's venerated and treated with importance, but what would be the specific thing you would change about it?
I do think religion does have an importance, not to me personally, but to people in this world. It gives them kind of a sense of comfort and purpose sometimes. I don't think it should be removed, or it's not invalid or anything, but I think its use in specifically like politics and making like policies and how exactly like people are interacted, or how people that are in certain religions interact with other people that are outsiders or who don't agree with their point of view. I think I would kind of just change, I guess, the importance level of where it's at on.
I see that.
Yeah.
So here's how I would articulate that: as religion is dogma in the sense that it's not a lie, nor is it something that you can 100% know to be true, and yet people still believe it as the truth. What you would change about the world is that people would not bring things that they don't know 100% for certain substantiated to be true into decision making, where things that are absolutely factual should solely be considered.
Definitely.
You would remove the dogma from it, essentially.
Yeah. It's been a thing of recent years, of even in like the past or whatever, but specifically in the US, of
US
church, separation of church and state. So it's been a wavery path.
The next question actually was, why? What brought you to this point that this would be what you would choose to change about the world? You just gave the example, of course, that within the world that you've observed around you, but I also want to ask you as an individual, what have you felt to make this decision? For instance, is there someone who you love very closely who has been hurt by religion? Have you been hurt by religion? You said that you've never had any substantial connection to it, but of course, not being raised in it and not being affected by it are quite different.
Definitely. I've never had, like, I guess, negative interactions. I have had negative interactions, but, like, impactful interactions with people that are religious, but I have had many people, friends, and even now in, like, politics and whatnot, where people are being hurt because of something that we cannot prove without a shadow of a doubt.
And of course, with this not being able to prove it, but still people put their full and undoubting faith into it, how would you justify it to someone who, of course, has the bias within themselves that, of course, even though they can't substantiate absolute proof without engaging in fallacies or engaging in something that can be falsifiable, how would you justify saying that you would want this removed? Or at the very least, you would want them to stop using their religion to influence. Because you have to understand, somebody with the bias of religion, from their perspective, it isn't something that they don't know to be true. They do know it to be true. Just because they can't bring proof to you that can't be falsifiable doesn't change their faith.
It's all about being faith and not knowing what's absolute, or however you word it.
I would give an example from history that I have in mind. If you look up the spear of Longinus, the spear that pierced Jesus Christ whenever he was crucified, and you look up the museum where it's stored, you're going to get a lot of museums claiming that they have the spear of Longinus. So in Armenia, in Italy, in Israel, or Palestine, the reason why these stories are invented, of course, most of those spears of Longinus are going to be fake. They must. There can't be 4 completely different spears that all pierced Jesus. It was one spear. And yet, people will build shrines around what they know is likely going to be a false spear. They need a story to believe, and then they need the physical, tangible proof of it. And besides, you have to remember, these religious people are following what they believe to be a virtue that gets you into eternal salvation. From a Christian perspective, to not force their religion on those around them would be paramount to just watching you go to hell and do nothing about it.
Yeah.
In some twisted way, it's altruistic. From the perspective of the Spanish Inquisition, by forcing Native Americans to convert to Catholicism before they brutally torture them to death, they were showing mercy. Because from their perspective, the torture they put them through after converting them to Christianity was a fraction that hell would put them through if they weren't converted. This is inherent of itself a fallacy, as we're talking about cognitive biases, that they fully believed what they were doing was right, yet they had no tangible proof, and without that proof, what they're doing is abhorrent to us, of course. But from their perspective, there was an entirely different... The world was nowhere near what we view it as. From their perspective, they were doing charity.
I understand that with doing charity and trying to kind of lead them in the right direction of what they thought was right. But that's also why there's people who go out and they hand out pamphlets and they try and talk to people about their religion. There's a difference, because those people who are religious also, they know that there are other religions that are quite the complete opposite of what they believe in. Yet their Christianity is very, very popular, so they're trying to put it on other people who they know not everybody agrees with. I know they think that they're doing right by themselves and God, but it's just, they can't expect everybody to kind of just go along and believe it too.
I don't want this to accidentally turn into a theological discussion, because naturally, of course, the thing about something unfalsifiable is it can neither be proven true nor false. That makes me beg the question, in making this decision about wanting to take these half-truths, these fictions out of decision-making, what steps of your life, what events, what biases brought you that this is your priority? that this is what you immediately thought, this is what I'd want to change about the world if given the opportunity?
You're asking me why I chose religion for...
Religion, or really just fictions in general?
I guess the reason why I kind of chose religion as kind of a interview answer was because I've always prided myself on being a very logical, factual person, and religion has never properly made sense to me because I didn't grow up in the culture and whatnot like that. And I've kind of just seen the way that it's negatively affected people around me, them kind of getting out of those households that they were shaped into. I guess a good example would be one of my best friends. As soon as they turned 18, they tried to, I guess, show their free will by trying to express their identity and kind of who they are and who they are as a person. And because of that, they grew up in a very religious household, very conservative as well. And then their parents found out that they were transgender, and in turn, immediately, no questions asked, were kicked out of their house. They came to my house, and they were kind of going back and forth between a few friends, trying to figure out what they're gonna do. I mean, they were just about to graduate high school, and they had a job, they didn't have money. It was just to go to school or anything. It was just really hard and difficult for them.
And what you're pointing out is you saw essentially a family turn against their child because of their dogma. The child wanted to express free will in their own identity, and the dogma of religion caused them to turn against someone who they clearly loved.
Somebody they raised since birth, yeah.
There are many fallacies at play there, and one of them, you used the word earlier that you were proud of being based on logic, and I think that pride, perhaps those parents felt their pride hurt by the fact that the identity that they had forced on that child had been rejected.
Yeah.
That they chose in their own free will to reject that identity.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
With regards to people, you gave your example that religion, for its many fallacies, fictions, have truths, or simply unfalsifiable claims. Do you think religious people, if they are truly and completely in faithful belief of these things that you've ascribed as not provably true, and yet still making decisions based on it, do you think they have the same amount of free will as someone who entirely bases their actions on things they know absolutely certainly with proof to be true?
Law-wise, I do believe that they still have the right to free will in their choices, but I guess on a philosophical standpoint,
Have they given up their free will?
I don't think they didn't really give up anything, because that in itself, them choosing to believe that is them using their free will.
But then when you think about it like this, they've given... Think of law.
Mm-hmm.
When we choose to follow the law, we are giving up a piece of our free will in the event that we wanted to break the law. If we choose to follow the law, we're giving up our free will to that law.
Mm-hmm.
Because we believe that law to be right. But what if that law is illegitimate, and yet people still give up their actions and decision-making to it?
I guess the difference, though, is with law and religion is law, there's literal punishment. Yes, there's punishment within the community and stuff, but there's no... It's really just a change in lifestyle if you were to be rejected from that that community.
Freudian slip, cult. But...
Sorry. But going against the law, like state or US, whatever, worldwide, you will probably get fined, you will get in jail, depending on, the It's literally taking away everything.
But to a religious person, not following their specific religious law is even worse than not following a worldly law because, for example, from a Christian perspective,
afterlife.
eternal damnation,
Yeah.
hellfire and brimstone, forever, never ending.
True. I guess though, if a person in the community of religion were to go against like the rules and whatnot, yes, there's kind of like an afterlife that could be damaged. It's them choosing to do those rules, though. With the law, we have no choice. We're born into it. But also that goes into whenever you're born into a religion and your parents are putting you in that, kind of.
Think of someone whose politics are determined by how their parents' politics lean because they learned how to believe from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who was never taught to make their own decisions, rather instead told what to think. Do they have the same free will if they've never even entertained what their own will would bring them? If their will was already determined by someone else? Do you think everybody's free will is equal? Or do you think some people have more free will than others because some people were able to determine more of their own actions than others, simply by virtue of how we became ourselves? Does a child have the same free will as an adult? These are many questions, and you may answer whichever ones however you'd like.
I'm trying to think about wording. I do think that free will can differ depending on the person, how much they have, kind of. I'm going blank. It's kind of hard to, I guess, measure what exactly free will is, because from my perspective and how I'm thinking, nobody truly has free will. Because we're all based on our experiences and the people we grow up with, and you can't exactly just grow up absolutely alone.
Not to mention how many of our decisions are forged by the things that we absolutely need to do. Humans are naturally afraid to be alone. They need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to shit, they need to fuck. Humans have natural needs and things that we're obviously going to be compelled to do simply by virtue of being human.
Mm-hmm.
Are those hindrances to free will? Because those are biases that are always going to be part of us, that people generalize men as always going to fuck when given the chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't say that's wrong or right, but that's a stereotype for a reason, because many men's cognitive biases determine that they would fuck any chance when given. It's simply because... Is the fact that that's something that men are pushed into rather than a decision they make themselves. Most men won't even question why they want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that evident? Is it free will on the fact that they choose to do that? Or is it a lack of free will that they naturally end up in that situation of pursuing that?
It makes me question, yeah, we have, like, biological biases with the whole, like, needs and stuff with our own body and whatnot, but it's like, so does every other creature on this earth.
Of course, but would you say every other creature on Earth has free will? I mean, it makes me start to think of even the smallest little microbe that has so little DNA, just basic instructions. Eat, reproduce, die.
Yeah.
Does that have free will?
Not really.
And it causes one to wonder, those biases that are innate to every creature, and weighing those biases against free will and its existence is exactly what this interview is.
Mm.
If anything, I'm not even going to give you a question here. Do you have any thoughts related to it? Weighing cognitive biases against free will.
I don't think free will even really exists. There's many people that would describe it as something different, but I guess it kind of depends on the creature you're asking or the molecule that you're interviewing. But cognitive bias definitely exists, without a doubt. I don't think free will I don't believe it exists because, I mean, I'm literally a psychology major. Every small interaction that we have with somebody, every
everything has a cause and effect, and it's hard to kind of have your own response because to how you would go about a situation because you were taught how to do so.
Of course,